Do you think it is possible to survive a snowstorm at minus 40 degrees Celsius in a dwelling made of sticks and animal skins? Modern people, dressed in high-tech clothing, would risk freezing to death in a matter of hours, but the indigenous peoples of North America lived in such conditions for centuries. They did not just survive the harsh winters of the Great Plains and the subarctic. They created comfort using only what nature provided them. They did not have modern insulation or heating systems, but their engineering solutions were so ingenious that they allowed them to stay warm even in the most severe blizzards. The secret lay not in one ingenious invention, but in a combination of many small details, from the correct angle of the teepee poles to the multi-layered construction of earthen houses. They used smoke to create thermal curtains and snow as the world's best insulating material. Every action, from laying fir flooring to sleeping together, was part of a unified survival strategy honed to perfection. Watch the video to the end to find out exactly what engineering solutions allowed the Indians to sleep warm while snowstorms raged outside. What if I told you that everything you believed about life in a teepee is not true? We are used to seeing teepees standing alone on snow-covered prairies in movies, and we think that they must be incredibly cold and drafty dwellings. Our modern experience suggests that a thin wall of animal skins cannot retain heat. We imagine people shivering from the cold and wrapping themselves in furs. This image is deeply rooted in the popular consciousness, but it has little to do with reality. In fact, a properly constructed winter teepee was a surprisingly comfortable and warm place. The indigenous peoples of the Great Plains, such as the Lakota and Cheyenne, did not simply endure the winter. They lived in their teepees in great comfort. The secret was that the teepee was not just a cone, but a complex and perfectly designed aerodynamic system. Its design had been refined over centuries to make the most efficient use of fire and air currents. Imagine a teepee not as a tent, but as a personal, controllable ecosystem. Its conical shape was no accident. It provided incredible resistance to the hurricane-force winds of the prairies. The wind did not hit the wall, but flowed smoothly around it, minimizing heat loss. Moreover, the slight backward tilt of the cone made it even more stable and aerodynamic. The inhabitants of the teepee could control the microclimate inside their home with remarkable precision. They controlled the flow of fresh air, smoke removal, and heat distribution. This was achieved through two key elements, which we will discuss in detail later: smoke vents at the top and a special inner lining. It was these details that transformed a simple shell made of animal skins into effective housing. The perception of the teepee as a cold dwelling is a mistake based on our ignorance of its construction. We look at it from the outside, but we don't understand what's going on inside. Inside, by the fire, on thick fur rugs, life flowed steadily and comfortably. Children played, women did needlework, and men told stories while a blizzard raged outside. For the people who lived in them, the tepee was the center of the universe, a warm and safe place. They did not consider their homes primitive. On the contrary, they were proud of their efficiency, mobility, and beauty. A portable dwelling that could be assembled in an hour and at the same time save them from the deadly cold was the pinnacle of the nomadic people's engineering genius. Modern reenactors who have tried living in authentic teepees in winter confirm this fact. When properly installed and all techniques are followed, the interior can be kept at room temperature, even when it is bitterly cold outside. The main thing is to know the secrets that were known to every inhabitant of the prairies. These secrets concern not only the construction, but also the correct use of materials. Everything was important: how the skins were sewn, how they were stretched, and the height of the inner lining. The slightest mistake could result in smoke filling the room or cold air penetrating inside. But when everything was done correctly, the system worked flawlessly. It was a harmony between man, his home, and the harsh nature. Understanding that the teepee was warm completely changes our view of the culture of the Plains peoples. They were not eternal sufferers struggling for survival. They were skilled engineers who created comfortable living conditions for themselves in one of the harshest climatic regions on the planet. Their home was their fortress and their warm hearth. We begin this study by debunking the myth, because that is the key to understanding everything else. Only by realizing that warmth in a teepee was the norm, not a miracle, can we begin to understand how they achieved it. Where are you watching us from? And how did you imagine winter in a teepee before this video? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I will reveal the most closely guarded engineering secret of the Great Plains that is not related to nomads. Not all indigenous peoples of the prairies were nomads who followed the herds. Tribes such as the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara, who lived along the Missouri River, led a semi-sedentary lifestyle. They were farmers and built some of the most impressive and energy-efficient dwellings in the world for the winter. Earth houses. These structures were true winter fortresses, capable of withstanding any blizzard. The design of the dugout was ingenious in its simplicity and followed one main principle: to use the earth as insulation. Construction began with the digging of a shallow, circular pit. 4 or 6 massive central pillars were installed in the center, which bore the main weight of the roof. Around them, along the perimeter of the house, a ring of lower support pillars was erected. A whole system of rafters running from the center to the edges was laid on this frame of thick logs. The result was a sturdy dome-shaped frame. This frame was then covered with a layer of willow rods, creating a dense woven base. A thick layer of dry grass was laid on top of the rods, which served as the first insulating layer. The most important step was to cover the entire structure with a thick layer of turf and earth. This layer could be up to 30 centimeters thick or more. The earth, especially turf with its dense network of roots, became virtually impervious to wind and cold. In winter, this layer was covered with snow, turning the house into part of the landscape and adding another, the most effective layer of insulation in the world. Such a house had enormous thermal mass. This means that the massive earthen walls and roof slowly accumulated heat from the internal hearth and just as slowly gave it back. Even if the fire in the hearth went out, the house remained at a comfortable temperature for a long time. This created a very stable and even microclimate, without the sharp fluctuations that are so characteristic of frame buildings. The only openings in this earthen hemisphere were the entrance and the smoke vent in the center of the dome. The entrance was not just a door, but another clever engineering solution. It was a long, low, covered tunnel that led away from the living quarters. This tunnel acted as an airlock or cold trap. Heavy cold air entering the tunnel could not immediately penetrate the living quarters, as it was displaced by warm air rising from inside. Often, the entrance tunnel had a slight upward slope toward the living area, which further enhanced this effect. In addition, the entrance was closed with a heavy curtain made of animal skin and sometimes with an internal wooden door, cutting off any remaining drafts. Inside, such an earthen house was huge. Its diameter could reach 15 meters, and it comfortably accommodated several generations of one large family, sometimes up to 40 people. The space was clearly divided into zones. Around the central hearth was a common area, and along the walls were sleeping platforms separated from each other by curtains made of skins. The smoke hole in the roof was not just a hole either. It not only removed smoke, but also served as the main source of light. It could be partially or completely closed with a special frame or a piece of skin, regulating ventilation and retaining heat. In winter, a high snowdrift was piled around the chimney, which created additional draft, like a chimney. Life in such a house in winter was completely protected. Outside, a blizzard could rage with hurricane-force winds, but inside it was quiet, warm, and bright from the fire. These structures were so sturdy and reliable that they lasted for decades. They were the perfect solution for a stationary winter camp, a real refuge gifted by the earth itself. Can you imagine what it's like to live inside a hill while a blizzard rages outside? But the earthen house was stationary. What about nomads? In the next chapter, we will reveal the secret that turned the wind-swept teepee into a real winter fortress. Something you've never seen before: the secret of a second teepee inside the first. It may seem illogical, but the most important element of the winter teepee was not the outer shell, but the inner one. The nomadic peoples of the plains developed an ingenious solution that we would today call an airflow management system. This element is known as an ozon in the Lakota language, or simply the inner lining of the teepee. This lining was a second wall made of thinner, well-tanned hides or, later, canvas. It was usually between 1.5 and 2 meters high, which is about shoulder height for an adult. It was attached to the tepee poles from the inside, but not directly to the outer covering. There was an air gap of several centimeters between the outer wall and the inner lining. This air gap was the key to warmth. It worked in two ways. First, it created an insulating air cushion. Still air is one of the best heat insulators. This layer prevented the icy cold from the outer shell from penetrating directly into the living space. Second, and this is the most ingenious part, this system created controlled air circulation. The outer covering of the tepee never reached the ground. It was deliberately left raised a few centimeters. Cold outside air flowed under the outer edge of the covering into this gap between the walls. Flowing upward through this gap, the cold air was heated by the warmth coming from inside the room through the thin inner lining. It also mixed with the warm air rising from the floor. As a result of this mixing, by the time the air reached the top of the lining, it was no longer freezing cold. It entered the living space smoothly and already warmed up. This system completely solved the problem of drafts. Instead of cold wind blowing directly at the feet of people sitting by the fire, it was redirected into a special channel, heated and smoothly fed into the room at shoulder level. This created constant and comfortable ventilation without any discomfort. In addition, this circulation played a key role in the operation of the hearth. The constant flow of fresh, heated air created a powerful draft for the fire in the center. The fire burned brightly and evenly. The warm air from the fire mixed with smoke rushed upward toward the smoke vents, carrying all the combustion products with it. The inner lining also served other functions. It made the room brighter, as the inner skins were often lighter in color and better reflected the light from the fire. They were often decorated with drawings telling the story of the family or important events, which made the interior incredibly cozy and personal. This screen of skins also protected against moisture. If moisture seeped through the seams of the outer shell during rain or snowmelt, it ran down it without getting on the people and things inside. Thus, the interior of the dwelling always remained dry. Without this lining, life in a tepee in winter would have been impossible. It is this lining that transforms a simple cone of skins into a highly efficient living machine. This solution demonstrates a deep intuitive understanding of the laws of convection and heat transfer. The creation of the tepee within a tepee was the unique solution that allowed nomads to conquer the harsh winters. If you didn't know about this ingenious airflow system, like this video, are you ready to learn the truth about how to avoid suffocating from smoke in an enclosed space? For Europeans accustomed to fireplaces and chimneys, the tepee's internal hearth seemed dangerous and primitive. However, the fire and smoke control system in the tepee was one of the most advanced in the world. It not only allowed for efficient heating of the room, but also complete control of airflow and smoke removal. The heart of the tepee was a small hearth, slightly recessed into the ground and located strictly in the center. Its small size was not a disadvantage, but an advantage. It required much less firewood, which was critically important in the treeless prairies where fuel had to be conserved. The compact and bright fire provided enough heat, which immediately rose upward. The main element for controlling smoke was two ears, or smoke valves, at the very top of the tepee. These were two triangular pieces of skin that were not part of the main shell. Each valve was controlled by a separate long pole that descended from the top outside the tepee to the ground. These poles allowed the inhabitants of the house to adjust the position of the valves without going outside. These valves were, in essence, a movable chimney. They could be turned and adjusted depending on the strength and direction of the wind. In calm weather, they could be spread apart, creating a large opening for smoke to escape. But in a blizzard, real aerodynamic magic began. The inhabitants of the tepee always placed their dwelling so that the entrance was on the leeward side, and the rear, more sloping part faced the main wind. The smoke vents were positioned so that the wind flowing around the cone created an area of low pressure directly above the smoke vent. This effect, known as the Venturi effect, literally sucked the smoke out of the tepee. One valve almost completely closed the opening on the windward side, while the other remained open, creating a protected pocket. The wind hitting the windward valve created turbulence and draft that carried the smoke away. It was a delicate adjustment that required experience and skill. The inner lining we discussed in the previous chapter also played a key role here. It provided a constant supply of fresh air to the fire from below. This flow created a steady column of hot air that rose straight up to the smoke hole, preventing the smoke from spreading throughout the living space. The air in the tepee moved in a clear circle, cold on the outside, heated in the gap, fed to the fire, and then hot smoke, strictly upward and outward. As a result, the air in the tepee was surprisingly clean. Smoke accumulated only under the dome itself, several meters high, where it did not bother anyone. In the living area, near the floor, where people sat, worked, and slept, the air was fresh and warm. This was a much healthier solution than the smoky and poorly ventilated European huts of the time. The fire in the tepee was never left unattended. Usually the women kept an eye on it. They kept the flames steady by adding small amounts of dry wood. At night, the fire was not completely extinguished. It was covered with ashes so that the coals would smolder until morning. In the morning, it was enough to fan the coals and add a few twigs to reignite the flame. Wood was not the only fuel used. There was little of it on the prairies, so the main fuel was often bison chips, dried bison dung. It produced an even, hot, and almost smokeless flame, which was ideal for the hearth in a tepee. Collecting and preparing this fuel was an important part of preparing for winter. Thus, the hearth in the tepee was not just a fire, but the heart of a complex system. This system included airflow, the firebox itself, and a high-tech chimney consisting of two controllable valves. The ability to control this system was as important a survival skill as the ability to hunt. Do you think it was difficult to control these smoke valves during a blizzard? In a tepee, the fire required constant monitoring, but in earthen houses, the system was different. In the next chapter, you will learn how they heated their huge underground dwellings. Unlike the light and dynamic tepee, the earthen house of the Missouri peoples was the embodiment of stability and permanence. Its heating system was based on a completely different principle, not on rapid air circulation, but on heat accumulation. The main element here was the enormous thermal mass of the structure itself, which functioned like a battery, accumulating and slowly releasing energy. The central hearth in the dugout was much larger than in the tepee. It was dug in the center of the earthen floor and often lined with stones. This hearth was the heart of the house, not only figuratively, but also literally. It burned almost constantly throughout the winter, requiring large amounts of firewood, which the tribes harvested in the summer in the floodplain forests. The heat from this large fire spread throughout the huge room, but most importantly, it was absorbed. It was absorbed by the earthen floor, thick earthen walls, and massive turf-covered roof. These tons of earth and wood slowly, hour after hour, heated up, accumulating a huge amount of thermal energy. At night, when the fire in the hearth was reduced or went out, the reverse process began. The earthen structures, heated during the day, began to slowly radiate the accumulated heat back into the room. This created an incredibly stable and comfortable temperature. Outside, a storm could rage, but inside the house, a steady, gentle warmth was maintained, similar to the warmth of a large stove. This system worked more effectively the colder it was outside. Frost bound the outer layers of earth on the roof and walls, making them even denser and more impervious to the wind. And the snow that fell, as we have already mentioned, covered the house with a thick blanket, providing perfect insulation. The house became almost an airtight thermos. Ventilation in such a massive structure was critically important. It was provided through two openings, the entrance tunnel and the smoke vent in the roof. The smoke vent, located directly above the hearth, was wide. It effectively removed smoke, which, thanks to the good draft from the large fire, rose vertically upward. At the same time, some fresh air came in through this same opening, but the main flow came through the long entrance tunnel. This cold trap worked brilliantly. Cold, heavier air flowed into the tunnel, but as it passed through it, it had time to warm up a little from the ground. Entering the living quarters, it sank to the floor and moved toward the central hearth, feeding the fire. A heavy bison skin curtain at the entrance to the living area from the tunnel served as an additional regulator. It could be opened or closed to control the flow of fresh air. The inhabitants of the house intuitively controlled this complex system, maintaining a balance between warmth and fresh air. The temperature inside the house was not uniform. It was cooler near the floor, while the hottest air accumulated under the dome. This was also used wisely. Along the walls were sleeping platforms that were raised above the floor. People slept not on the cold ground, but in a layer of warmer air. These sleeping places were like little houses within a house. They consisted of wooden platforms surrounded on three sides by woven mats or skins. Additional skins were hung over the top in front of the sleeping area. Inside this cozy alcove, body heat was retained, and it was much warmer than in the rest of the room. Thus, the heating of an earthen house was a complex system. It combined direct heating from a large hearth, heat accumulation by massive walls and a roof, and a well-designed ventilation system through a chimney and an entrance tunnel. It was an energy-efficient technology that allowed dozens of people to spend the winter comfortably, using only firewood in the heat of the earth itself. The secret that people pay thousands for: how to use the earth as a heat accumulator. In addition to the central hearth, which was the main source of heat, many indigenous peoples, especially in subarctic regions, used another, much more cunning method. This is the heat pit, or, in essence, underfloor heating technology based on hot stones. This method made it possible to create a local and long-lasting source of heat without smoke or fire. The principle was simple, but it required preparation. A small pit was dug in the living quarters, often under the sleeping platform. This pit was carefully lined with a layer of clay to make it more airtight, or simply packed down tightly with earth. Nearby, in the main hearth, large, smooth stones were heated during the day. When the stones were red hot, they were carefully rolled over with special wooden tongs or sticks and placed at the bottom of the heat pit. The stones were covered with a layer of sand or earth. This layer was critically important. It prevented burns and served to distribute the heat evenly. On top of this pie, they put back the sleeping platforms made of branches, grass, and skins. The result was a real heat battery. The hot stones, insulated by a layer of earth, could not cool down quickly. They slowly gave off their heat over many hours. The earth above them heated up and radiated a soft, deep heat that rose from below, straight to the sleeping people. It was incredibly comfortable and effective. While the air in the room could cool down, especially in the morning, the bed remained warm. The heat came from the most vulnerable place, the ground, which is usually the main source of cold. People slept not on a cold surface, but on what was essentially a heated mattress. This method was ideal for nighttime. It did not require maintaining a fire, which would have to be constantly monitored and would consume valuable fuel. The heat pit, charged in the evening, worked all night, ensuring a comfortable sleep. The absence of smoke and open flames also made sleeping safer. Such heat pits could be used for more than just sleeping. In some cultures, they were used to dry clothes and moccasins. Wet clothes were laid out on a platform above the pit, and by morning they were dry and warm. This was vital in wet snow or winter thaws. Sometimes this principle was used on a larger scale. In the large semi-dugouts of the subarctic peoples, there could be entire trenches filled with hot coals and stones that ran under the sleeping platforms. This was already a whole central heating system running on stored energy. Choosing the right stones also required knowledge. Only certain types of rock were used. Dense river stones that did not crack or shoot when heated. Porous sandstone could explode from steam, so it was avoided. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation. The heat pit is a striking example of how indigenous peoples use the most basic elements, fire, stone, and earth, to create complex and effective technologies. They intuitively understood the principles of heat capacity and heat transfer. This method allowed them to create maximum comfort in the harshest conditions with minimal fuel consumption. Today, heated floors technology is considered a modern achievement, but as we can see, its basic principle was known thousands of years ago. It was born not in laboratories, but in snow-covered forests and prairies, as an ingenious response to the challenge posed by nature. Have you ever used a similar method, for example, with a hot water bottle? But hot stones were not enough to sleep on the bare ground. In the next chapter, we will examine how warm floors were created in pre-Columbian America. Even with a warm dwelling and a fire, sleeping on the cold ground would be impossible without proper insulation. Indigenous peoples were masters at creating fir flooring, but it was not just a pile of skins. It was a complex, multi-layered system where each layer performed its own specific function. The goal was not only to create softness, but more importantly, to block out the cold and dampness coming from the ground. The first and most important layer was the insulating base layer. Its task was to create an air gap and wick away moisture. Dry grass, sedge, or reeds were ideal for this purpose. In the prairies, tall grasses were gathered and tied into bundles or woven into thick mats. In forested areas, soft spruce or fir branches were used, laid out in a dense, springy carpet. This layer, several tens of centimeters thick, prevented the body from coming into contact with the cold ground. The air trapped between the dry stems or needles served as the primary heat insulator. In addition, this layer breathed, allowing moisture, which a sleeping person inevitably releases, to pass through and preventing it from accumulating and making the bed damp. A second layer, a platform, was placed on top of this plant mattress. These were usually untreated stiff hides, such as bison hides without fur or thick deer skins. This layer served as protection against wind and moisture. It prevented cold drafts from the floor from penetrating the bed from below. It also protected the upper valuable fur layers from dirt and moisture from the floor. Only on top of this platform was the third, most comfortable layer laid, the fur flooring itself. These were soft, beautifully crafted skins, most often bison or deer, with their winter fur intact. Bison, with its thick and warm undercoat, was especially prized. These skins served as both a mattress and a blanket. These fur sleeping robes were works of art. Women spent hundreds of hours preparing them, making the skins soft and supple. Often, several skins were sewn together to create a large blanket under which the whole family could sleep. They usually slept directly on these furs, covering themselves with other lighter skins or special fur sleeping bags. The creation of such a sleeping bag was another ingenious solution. To make it, they took a large skin, for example, a bear skin or several sewn-together deer skins, folded it in half with the fur inside, and sewed it along the edges, leaving an opening for entry. Once inside such a bag, a person was completely surrounded by warm fur. In earthen houses, as already mentioned, these multi-layered beds were not placed on the floor, but on raised wooden platforms. This further increased their effectiveness. Cold air accumulated under the platform, while the bed itself was in a warmer air zone. In addition, it was more hygienic. Bed maintenance was an important part of daily rituals. On a nice, frosty, sunny day, the skins and furs were taken outside. They were beaten and frozen in the sun. The frost killed any parasites and evaporated any accumulated moisture, while the sun made the fur fluffy. After such treatment, the bedding became fresh, dry, and even warmer. This multi-layered system of bedding was no less important than the construction of the dwelling itself. It solved a key problem: insulating the body from the cold surface during many hours of sleep. Without it, no hearth could protect against hypothermia. It was the science of sleep, perfected. Layers of grass, tough leather, and soft fur worked together like a modern camping system consisting of a foam mat, sleeping bag, and membrane pad. Each element was in its place and performed an irreplaceable function. This proves once again that indigenous peoples had a deep practical knowledge of physics and material science. Moving northeast from the Great Plains, we find a completely different culture and approach to winter housing. The peoples who were part of the Iroquois Confederacy lived in the famous longhouses. These structures were not just dwellings, but entire villages under one roof, and their heating system was based on the principle of collectivism. A longhouse was a huge structure made of a wooden frame covered with bark, usually elm. Its length could reach 60 and sometimes even 100 meters. The width was standard, about 6 to 7 meters. Several dozen related families, sometimes up to 100 people, lived side by side in such a house. And it was this collective living that was the first and main factor in heating. Imagine 100 people living in one, albeit large, but enclosed space. Every human body is a small heater, constantly giving off heat. The combined heat emitted by all the inhabitants made a significant contribution to the overall heat balance of the house. This heat warmed the air and objects, creating a basic comfortable temperature. The second and main source of heat was the hearths. A whole series of hearths were located along the entire central passage of the longhouse, at equal distances from each other. Each hearth served two families living opposite each other on either side of the passage. There could be up to 10 such hearths burning simultaneously in a longhouse. These fires, burning on the earthen floor, created a powerful stream of hot air. The smoke rose to the ceiling, where special smoke vents were made in the roof. These vents could be adjusted with movable bark sheets, controlling the draft and protecting against rain or snow. Although the ventilation was worse than in a teepee, the huge amount of fire created a strong draft. The walls of the longhouse were made of overlapping bark. In winter, they were additionally insulated. On the inside, the walls were covered with thick woven mats and skins, which created an air gap and blocked drafts. Outside, the lower part of the house was often covered with snow, which served as an excellent insulator. The sleeping arrangements were also cleverly designed. Along both long walls of the house was a two-tiered system of bunks. The lower tier, about 2 meters wide, served as a bench for sitting during the day and a bed at night. The upper tier, located above it, was used to store utensils, food supplies, and sometimes as an additional sleeping place. This two-tiered structure was important for retaining heat. People slept on wooden platforms raised above the cold earthen floor. Each family had its own cubicle, separated from its neighbors by curtains made of animal skins. It was much warmer inside this alcove than in the central passageway. Fuel supplies were critical to this system. The Iroquois lived in dense, deciduous forests, so firewood was not a problem. Preparing firewood for the winter was one of the main responsibilities of the men. Huge wood piles were stacked directly inside the house, along the walls, creating an additional insulating barrier. Living in a longhouse had its drawbacks, such as smoke and lack of privacy. But in terms of thermal efficiency in a cold climate, it was a brilliant solution. By combining resources, fuel, and the heat of their own bodies under one roof, the Iroquois created a powerful heat island in the middle of a snow-covered forest. This system was entirely based on social structure. Heat was shared, as was space. Survival in the harsh winter was ensured not by individual efforts, but by the coordinated work of the entire community. Each hearth warmed not only 2 families, but the entire house, contributing to the common good. The longhouse is an example of how architecture and social structure can be inextricably linked to solve a common problem. In this case, the problem was survival in winter, and the solution found by the Iroquois, though noisy and smoky, was incredibly warm and reliable. No matter how warm a hut, dugout, or teepee was, people could not spend the entire winter in it. Hunting, gathering fuel, moving between camps, all of this required being outdoors, often in extreme cold. Therefore, no less important than the architecture of the dwelling was the personal thermal fortress, the winter clothing of indigenous peoples. The main principle they used was layering. This principle is the basis of all modern tourist and extreme clothing today. They intuitively understood that it is not the clothing itself that keeps you warm, but the air trapped between its layers. Therefore, they never wore one thick and heavy item, but preferred several thinner ones. The first inner layer was often made of soft, finely crafted suede. Its purpose was to absorb sweat and wick it away from the body. Subarctic peoples, such as the Cree, sometimes wore special vests made of woven strips of rabbit fur under their clothes, which created a fluffy air layer directly on the skin. Next came the main items of clothing: a shirt, leggings, separate trousers, and a loincloth. All of these were sewn from well-tanned deer or elk skin. In winter, the same items were often used, but with the fur sewn on the inside. The fur close to the body retained warm air. Parkas and capes served as outerwear. The peoples of the subarctic were masters at making parkas, hooded jackets sewn from caribou skins with the fur on the inside. The seams were carefully stitched with sinew, which made the clothing almost airtight. On the plains, the main winter clothing was a heavy robe made from a single bison skin. The bison robe was a versatile item. It was worn with the fur on the inside, as the wool retained heat better when it touched the body. In severe frost, it could be wrapped around the head, and in warm weather, it could simply be thrown over the shoulders. The long, thick winter fur of the bison was one of the best insulators in the world. Special attention was paid to protecting the limbs, as they freeze first. Several layers were worn on the feet. First came a kind of socks made of soft fur or dry grass. The dry grass itself, which was stuffed into the shoes, was a brilliant solution. It not only insulated, but also absorbed sweat, keeping the feet dry. Winter moccasins were taller and roomier than summer ones to accommodate all these layers. They were made of thick but flexible elk leather. Sometimes they were made with a high upper that tied below the knee, becoming one with the leggings and protecting against snow. Hands were protected by mittens or gloves, which were also made of leather with fur on the inside. They were often made very large so that the entire hand could be pulled inside along with the sleeve, leaving no exposed areas. Hoods or separate hats made of beaver or fox fur protected the head and face. The most important feature of this clothing was its breathability. Unlike modern waterproof synthetic fabrics, leather and fur allowed vapor to pass through. This prevented sweat from accumulating under the clothing. In extreme cold, sweat is the main enemy. When wet, it freezes instantly, leading to rapid hypothermia. Indigenous peoples knew this and avoided overheating as much as they avoided hypothermia. This entire clothing system was the result of centuries of adaptation to specific climatic conditions. Each people used the materials that were available. The peoples of the plains used bison, the forest peoples used deer and moose, and the subarctic peoples used caribou. But the principles, layering, protecting the extremities, and managing moisture, were universal and worked flawlessly. Even the most sophisticated technologies would not have worked without the last, and perhaps most important, element, the social one. The winter survival of Native Americans was based on collectivism and proper behavior. The warmth in the house was maintained not only by firewood, but also by the presence of people, their joint activities, and mutual assistance. One of the simplest and most effective methods mentioned in the request was sleeping together. On harsh nights, when the fire in the hearth was reduced to save fuel, the whole family, parents, children, and sometimes grandparents, would sleep together under one large fur blanket. This was not just a tradition, but a necessity of life. By huddling together, their bodies generated and retained heat. Heat loss for each individual was greatly reduced. Infants and small children who lose heat the fastest always slept between adults in the warmest and safest place. This thermal cocoon of several bodies was much more effective than any individual sleeping bag. The same was true of the earthen houses or longhouses of the Iroquois. Dozens of people living in one space inevitably warmed it up. Even their breath containing warm vapor slightly increased the temperature and humidity, making the air less dry and frosty. It was collective heating. Winter was a time when social life became particularly intense. Unlike summer, which was filled with hunting, hiking, and harvesting, winter was a time of long nights. People spent most of their time indoors, in the close circle of family and neighbors. This time was used to strengthen social ties. Men repaired weapons and equipment and carved wood or stone. Women sewed and embroidered clothes, wove mats, and prepared food. But the main winter activity was storytelling. The elders passed on myths, legends, and the history of the tribe to the younger generation. This oral tradition not only entertained but also educated, uniting generations. Winter life was organized to minimize heat loss. Doors or curtains at the entrance were opened as rarely as possible and for as short a time as possible. Children were taught not to run around aimlessly. Any activity outside was carefully planned. Food was a crucial factor. The winter diet was high in calories and fat. Pemmican, a concentrate of dried meat, fat, and berries, was the ideal winter food. Fat provided the body with the energy it needed to generate its own heat. Hot soups and stews made from bones and dried meat were not only filling, but also warmed the body from the inside. Thus, warmth in a winter dwelling was the result not only of engineering, but also of social technologies. Proper architecture, an efficient hearth, multi-layered bedding, and clothing were only half the battle. The other half was collectivism, sleeping together, proper nutrition, and a measured rhythm of life, all subordinated to the main task, to conserve precious energy until the arrival of spring. We can see that the survival of Native Americans in harsh snowstorms was not a miracle, but the result of outstanding knowledge and skill. They did not simply fight the cold, they controlled it. Using ingenious engineering solutions, such as the aerodynamic shape of the tepee, an inner lining to control airflow and controllable smoke vents, they turned a simple dwelling into an efficient heat engine. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. We are interested in reading your ideas and strive to cover topics that are truly interesting to you. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next research on the life and customs of Indigenous peoples.